They kicked me out for being broke. They laughed when I arrived in my old car. They told me I was embarrassing the family. But what they didn't know was that the beautiful beach house they loved more than anything already belonged to me. Before that weekend ended, every one of them would regret the way they treated me. My name is Casey Whitmore. For as long as I can remember, my relatives treated me like I was the failure of the family. They never said it directly when I was younger, but as the years passed, they became less careful with their words. My cousins always showed off their expensive jobs, luxury cars, and fancy lifestyles. At every family gathering, they talked about money and success as if that was all that mattered. I lived a much quieter life. I worked hard, kept to myself, and never felt the need to impress anyone. That summer, our annual family reunion was held at the same beach house everyone loved. It sat right by the ocean and looked like something from a magazine. My relatives spent months talking about the trip and how excited they were to return. The moment I drove into the driveway, I knew I wasn't welcome. My old sedan looked completely out of place beside the expensive SUVs and luxury cars parked outside. As I stepped out, my cousin Sloane looked at my car and smirked. She whispered something to another cousin, and they both laughed. Inside the house, things only got worse. My Uncle Barrett shook my hand and asked if I had finally found a real career yet. Several people at the table laughed. I forced a smile and pretended it didn't bother me. I tried to enjoy the reunion anyway. I helped prepare food, cleaned up after dinner, and stayed polite to everyone. But no matter what I did, I felt like an outsider in my own family. As the evening went on, the comments became more frequent. The looks became colder. Deep down, I could feel that something bigger was coming. I just didn't know how cruel my family was about to become. I stayed outside on the back deck for a while, staring at the dark ocean. The sound of the waves usually helped me relax, but not that night. I could still hear laughter coming from inside the house. Every laugh felt like it was aimed at me. When I finally went back inside, nobody asked where I had been. Nobody seemed to care. The conversation picked up right where it had left off. They talked about investments, promotions, vacations, and expensive purchases. I sat quietly and listened. Aunt Delaney suddenly brought up my cousin Grant's new house. She spent several minutes praising him for making smart choices and building a successful future. Then she looked directly at me and asked why some people never seemed to move forward in life. A few relatives chuckled. Others avoided eye contact, pretending they didn't hear the comment. Sloane wasn't done either. She talked about her promotion for the third time that evening and asked if I was still working the same job. Before I could answer, she said she couldn't imagine being stuck in one place for so many years. The table erupted with laughter again. I felt my face grow hot, but I stayed calm. Arguing would only give them more entertainment. As dinner continued, the atmosphere became even more uncomfortable. People started sharing stories about career achievements and financial success. Every topic seemed carefully chosen to remind me that I didn't belong in their eyes. Then Uncle Barrett pushed back his chair and stood up holding a glass. At first, I thought he was giving a normal family toast. Instead, he began talking about standards. He said family gatherings should celebrate people who work hard and accomplish something meaningful. He spoke about ambition, success, and surrounding yourself with winners. Then his eyes landed on me. The entire room became silent. He said some people brought negativity because they refused to improve their lives. He claimed they held everyone else back. Several relatives nodded as if they fully agreed. Then came words I never expected to hear. They told me future reunions would be better if I stayed away until I could prove I belonged there. For a moment, I couldn't even process what had happened. I looked around the table, hoping someone would speak up. Nobody did. Not a single person defended me. I quietly stood, grabbed my keys, and walked toward the door. Behind me, conversations slowly started again as if nothing important had happened. That hurt more than the insults themselves. The road was almost empty as I drove away from the beach house. The farther I got from my family, the quieter everything became. For the first time that night, I could hear my own thoughts. I kept asking myself the same question. How had things reached this point? I had never asked any of them for money. I had never caused problems at family events. I had never judged them for their choices. Yet somehow, they had decided I was the one who didn't belong. Around midnight, I stopped at a small diner near the highway. I ordered coffee and sat alone in a corner booth. My phone remained silent. No calls. No messages. Not even from relatives who had seemed uncomfortable during dinner. That hurt more than I expected. As I sat there, memories from the past several years came back to me. There was a time when my life looked very different. After college, I struggled more than most people knew. I worked long hours, often taking extra shifts just to cover rent and basic expenses. While other people spent weekends relaxing, I spent mine learning about real estate, business management, and investing. Progress came slowly. There were months when I wondered if all the effort was worth it. Some deals failed. Some plans didn't work out. More than once, I had to start over from scratch. But I kept going. Little by little, things improved. One opportunity led to another. A small project became a larger one. The business grew steadily because I treated every dollar carefully. I never talked about any of it with my family. Every time they asked questions, it felt less like concern and more like an attempt to measure my worth. So I learned to keep my personal life private. The funny thing was that they mistook silence for failure. Because I didn't brag, they assumed I had nothing. Because I lived simply, they assumed I was struggling. They never looked beyond appearances. By the time they were laughing at me that night, my life was already completely different from what they imagined. The truth was sitting right in front of them the entire time. They just never cared enough to see it. And soon, whether they liked it or not, they were going to learn exactly who I had become. The next morning, I woke up after only a few hours of sleep. My mind was still replaying everything that had happened at dinner. Part of me wanted to pack my things, drive home, and never attend another family event again. It would have been the easiest choice. Nobody had stopped me from leaving. Nobody had reached out during the night. As far as they were concerned, the problem had already been solved. I sat in my hotel room for nearly an hour, staring out the window at the ocean. The waves moved back and forth without caring about any of the drama from the night before. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't ready to leave. Not because I wanted another argument. I wanted to understand something. Why had people who shared my blood spent years making me feel small? Why did they measure a person's value by a paycheck, a car, or a job title? I couldn't understand it. Eventually, I got dressed and drove back to the beach house. I told myself I would stay calm, keep my distance, and make it through the rest of the weekend. The moment I walked through the front door, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Several relatives were gathered in the living room. Conversation stopped for a second when they saw me. Sloane looked up from the couch and laughed. "Well, look who's back," she said. Aunt Delaney crossed her arms and asked if I had come to apologize for making things awkward the night before. Before I could answer, Uncle Barrett joined the conversation. He said I should appreciate the honesty I had received. According to him, most people never hear the truth about themselves. A few family members nodded along. I stood there listening while they talked about me as if I wasn't even in the room. Nobody asked where I had stayed. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody cared that they had humiliated me in front of everyone. For years, I had convinced myself that if I worked harder, stayed kinder, and proved myself enough times, things would eventually change. Standing there that morning, I finally saw the truth. The problem had never been me. I had spent years trying to earn acceptance from people who had already decided not to give it. And for the first time in my life, I stopped blaming myself for their behavior. That afternoon, the mood inside the beach house changed. After the tension from the morning faded, everyone slowly drifted back into their usual behavior. Music played softly in the background, glasses clinked, and people moved between the kitchen and living room like nothing had happened. Soon the talk shifted to the house itself. My cousin Grant walked out onto the balcony and said this place felt like something out of a dream. Sloane agreed quickly, saying she wished they could come here every year without worrying about availability. Aunt Delaney started talking about how peaceful it would be to own a place like this instead of always renting. The conversation grew louder as more people joined in. Ideas started flying around. Someone joked about pooling money together to buy a similar beach house one day. Another relative laughed and said they should convince the current owner to sell this one instead. They spoke as if the house was just another prize waiting for them to grab. I stayed quiet near the kitchen counter, watching them. It hit me in a strange way. They weren't just admiring the house. They were using it as a symbol of success, something to prove they had made it in life. The walls, the view, the expensive furniture, none of that mattered on its own. It was what it represented that excited them. Status. Image. Approval. Not comfort. Not family memories. Not even happiness. Just the idea of being seen as successful. As I listened, I started noticing small things I had ignored before. The way Uncle Barrett carefully avoided talking about his business lately. The way Aunt Delaney always changed the subject when finances came up. The way Sloane's laughter sometimes sounded forced when she talked about her promotion. Behind the confidence, something else was there. uncertainty. Later, when most of them were distracted in different rooms, I overheard two cousins talking near the hallway. One mentioned how credit card payments were stacking up. The other joked weakly about pretending to be fine until things got better. It wasn't just one or two people. It was more than I expected. The same people who mocked my simple life were quietly struggling to keep their own image alive. Expensive clothes, rented luxury cars, perfect vacation photos, all of it felt less real the more I looked closely. For years, they had acted like I was the one falling behind. But standing there in that house, I realized something I had never seen before. Their confidence wasn't real strength. It was pressure they were hiding behind. The next morning started quietly. Sunlight came through the curtains, and for a short moment, everything felt normal again. Then my phone started ringing on the small table beside the bed. It was Ethan Mercer. His voice was calm, professional, like always. He told me he would be coming to the beach house later in the day. There was an ownership update that needed to be handled in person, along with a few final confirmations for records. I listened without interrupting. I could hear papers turning on his side of the call, like he was already preparing for it. For a few seconds after the call ended, I just sat there. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. It was something quieter than that. More like clarity. I thought about everything that had been said to me since I arrived. Every laugh. Every comment. Every moment I had stayed silent instead of responding. I didn't plan anything in that moment. I didn't feel like I needed to. But one thought became very clear. I wasn't going to keep protecting people who never bothered to protect my dignity. I got up, made coffee, and looked out at the ocean from the window. The beach looked peaceful, like nothing in the world ever went wrong there. Waves kept moving in and out, steady and patient. A few hours passed. The house slowly came alive again. I could hear footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, and voices drifting in from the kitchen. Someone turned on music. Someone else laughed too loudly, like they were trying to stretch the good mood into the next day. No one looked worried. No one looked like anything could possibly change. By late morning, I heard glasses clinking again. Bottles were opened. The kitchen filled with the smell of food being prepared. They were already planning the day like it was just another vacation. Sloane's voice carried from the living room, excited about going out later. Another cousin was talking about renting jet skis. Even Uncle Barrett sounded relaxed again, telling a story that made everyone laugh. I stood near the stairs for a moment, listening. It felt strange how quickly people forget discomfort when they choose to ignore it. They were laughing, drinking, and talking about plans for the evening, completely unaware that someone was on the way who would change the atmosphere of the entire house without raising their voice at all. I didn't say anything. I just finished my coffee and placed the cup down slowly. The day looked normal from the outside. But not for long. Late that afternoon, a black car pulled up outside the beach house. It slowed down near the entrance and stopped neatly by the driveway. The sound of the engine made a few people look up from their conversations. A man stepped out. It was Ethan Mercer. He looked calm, dressed neatly, holding a small leather folder in his hand. The moment he walked toward the house, the energy inside shifted slightly, but not in a worrying way. If anything, people seemed curious. Sloane was the first to greet him at the door. She smiled like she had met someone from the rental office before. "Hi. You must be here for the house," she said in a friendly tone. Others gathered around quickly, thinking he was just part of the management staff. Uncle Barrett even reached out to shake his hand. Ethan nodded politely and stepped inside without hesitation. His eyes moved around the room once, taking in the space, the people, the noise, the relaxed atmosphere. Then the questions started coming all at once. Someone asked if the house was still available for future bookings. Another cousin wanted to know if prices would stay the same next year. Delaney even asked if they could extend their stay in the future without any issues. Ethan listened without rushing. He placed his folder on the table and gave a small, professional smile. Late that afternoon, a black car pulled up outside the beach house. It slowed down near the entrance and stopped neatly by the driveway. The sound of the engine made a few people look up from their conversations. A man stepped out. It was Ethan Mercer. He looked calm, dressed neatly, holding a small leather folder in his hand. The moment he walked toward the house, the energy inside shifted slightly, but not in a worrying way. If anything, people seemed curious. Sloane was the first to greet him at the door. She smiled like she had met someone from the rental office before. "Hi. You must be here for the house," she said in a friendly tone. Others gathered around quickly, thinking he was just part of the management staff. Uncle Barrett even reached out to shake his hand. Ethan nodded politely and stepped inside without hesitation. His eyes moved around the room once, taking in the space, the people, the noise, the relaxed atmosphere. Then the questions started coming all at once. Someone asked if the house was still available for future bookings. Another cousin wanted to know if prices would stay the same next year. Delaney even asked if they could extend their stay in the future without any issues. Ethan listened without rushing. He placed his folder on the table and gave a small, professional smile. He answered each question carefully, saying everything was currently in order, but that a formal update process was taking place. That sentence made a few people pause. Update process? Sloan repeated, slightly confused. Ethan nodded. Yes. There have been some ownership adjustments that need to be finalized. The room changed instantly. The casual mood faded a little. People exchanged quick looks, trying to understand what he meant. Barrett stepped closer. Ownership adjustments? What exactly does that mean? Ethan didn't react to the rising tension. He simply opened his folder. It means the property has recently gone through a transition, he said calmly. The word transition made the room go quieter. Sloane's smile disappeared. Delaney's hand stopped moving. Even the background music seemed too loud all of a sudden. Ethan looked up from the folder. And the new owner is currently present in this house. The silence that followed was sharp and immediate. No one spoke. No one laughed. People slowly looked around the room, trying to figure out what they had just heard. Some turned toward the windows, others toward the hallway. But nobody looked at me. Not yet. Ethan stood still for a moment after saying those words. The room was so quiet that even small sounds felt too loud. No one moved. It was like time had slowed down inside the house. Then he took a step forward. He walked past everyone standing near the living room and moved straight toward me. His expression didn't change. It was calm, controlled, like he was simply doing his job. I could feel every eye slowly turning in my direction. Ethan stopped right in front of me and gave a small respectful nod. Miss Whitmore, he said clearly. The moment my name came out of his mouth, the atmosphere broke. Sloane blinked like she didn't hear it right. Delaney frowned, trying to process what was happening. Barrett straightened his back, suddenly alert. The laughter and casual talk from before were completely gone. Ethan turned slightly toward the group, still calm, still professional. I want to thank you for your continued trust, he said. The ownership transition review for this property has been completed. He paused just long enough for the words to sink in. Then he continued. Miss Whitmore is the confirmed owner of this property. For a second, nobody reacted. It was like their brains refused to accept what they had just heard. Then the reaction started. Sloane shook her head slightly, like she was trying to wake herself up from a dream. No, that can't be right, she whispered. Barrett looked between Ethan and me, his face tightening. There must be some mistake, he said quickly, his voice higher than before. Delaney stepped back a little, one hand touching the edge of the chair as if she needed support. But Ethan didn't change his statement. He simply nodded once, confirming it again without emotion. The beach house, the same one they had talked about, admired, planned around every year, belonged to me. The words hung in the air too heavy to ignore. I could see it now in their faces. The confidence they had walked in with earlier was gone. Replaced by confusion, then shock, then something closer to panic. They kept looking at each other, trying to find an explanation that made sense. But there wasn't one. Because the person they had been judging, laughing at, and pushing away for years, was standing right in front of them the entire time. The room didn't stay silent for long. As soon as the shock settled, the energy shifted again, but in a different way. This time, it wasn't confidence or laughter. It was panic mixed with forced politeness. Sloane was the first to move. She took a step closer, her voice suddenly soft. Casey, we didn't mean it like that, she said quickly, forcing a nervous smile. You know how family jokes go. A second ago, she couldn't even look at me properly. Now she was trying to stand right beside me like nothing had happened. Delaney followed right after. She adjusted her hair and spoke in a careful tone. I was only trying to push you, she said. You always had potential. I just wanted you to see it. Her words sounded rehearsed, like she had been waiting for a way to explain herself. Barrett cleared his throat. He didn't look at anyone directly. If I sounded harsh last night, that wasn't my intention, he said. Sometimes things come out wrong when emotions are high. Nobody mentioned how loud they had laughed. Nobody mentioned how easily they had agreed to push me out. Sloane let out a small nervous laugh, trying to lighten the mood. Okay, come on, she said, waving her hand slightly. We've all said things we didn't mean. But something inside me had already changed. I didn't feel the need to argue. I didn't feel the need to explain anything anymore. For years, I had tried to make them understand me. I had stayed quiet, stayed polite, stayed patient, thinking one day they would see me differently. Now I saw clearly. I stood there calmly and listened as they tried to reshape what had happened. Every sentence was an attempt to soften the past, to make it sound smaller than it was. When they finally paused, I spoke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I simply repeated what had been said to me the night before. Word for word. The comments about being a failure. The jokes about my life. The decision to exclude me. With each sentence, their expressions changed again. This time, there were no interruptions. No excuses came fast enough, because everything I said was still fresh. Still recent. Still true. When I finished, no one spoke. The room felt heavier than before. Not angry. Not loud. Just quiet in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed their approval at all. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue with anyone. I didn't try to win any more explanations. Everything had already been said. I turned slightly toward Ethan, who was still standing nearby with his folder in hand. My voice was calm when I spoke. From this point forward, I said, no future family bookings will be accepted under the current arrangement. Ethan didn't hesitate. He simply nodded once, like he understood exactly what I meant. The room reacted immediately. It was not loud at first. It was worse than that. It was stillness. Sloane's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Delaney froze in place, her hands tightening around her sleeves. Barrett looked like he was trying to process what he had just heard but couldn't make it fit in his mind. Someone in the back whispered something, but even that sounded far away. The idea of returning here every year, of treating this place like their private escape, suddenly didn't exist anymore. I watched it land in their faces. Not anger. Not arguments. Loss. I turned back toward them and spoke one last time, still steady. I hope you all understand something, I said. This place was never just a vacation for me. And family was never supposed to feel like this. No one responded. The silence held. I gave a small nod, not for them, but for myself. Then I added quietly, thank you for showing me what I needed to see. I didn't wait for a reply. I walked past them and stepped out onto the balcony. The air outside was cooler. The ocean stretched out wide and endless, moving like it didn't care about anything that had just happened inside the house. Waves kept rolling in, steady and calm, like they always had been. Behind me, I could hear movement starting again, voices rising in confusion and panic, people trying to fix something that couldn't be undone. But I didn't turn back. I stayed there for a moment, looking at the water. For years, they thought I was the one struggling. The one behind. The one who didn't have much. They never looked closely enough to see what I was building in silence. And now it was clear. I hadn't been trying to prove anything to them at all. I had been building a life where I no longer needed their approval. They came here thinking I was the outsider. In the end, they were the ones who didn't belong anymore.